applying. Well, we're looking forward very much to hearing Dr. Waigi's fascinating topic, Rewilding the Landscape of Christian Thought, reading D.O. Fagunwa's Forest of 1,000 Demons as a contribution to theology. So Abraham, Dr. Waigi, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Auntie Mary. Permit me to share with you my screen so that you can follow. It's actually a full text. So you may want to follow or just listen, depending on your ability. I don't know whether, Dr. Gazy, am I able to share? I'm not sure whether we have Dr. Gazy with us.
Yes, Abraham, you should be able to share. I've made you a co-host.
Oh, thank you.
To try out SC.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so you can see my screen, yeah. Rewilding the Landscape of Christian Thought, reading D.O. Fagunwa's Forest of 1,000 Demons as a contribution to theology. This paper will be comprised of 3 parts. In the first part, I will focus on the writer and the translator of the novel. In the second part, I will attempt a summary of the novel, while at the same time raising particular questions related to the topic of this presentation. In the concluding part, I will justify the topic as I relate to the growing ecological phenomenon of wilding, the returning to nature of cultivated lands, as well as to the notion of God being the wild one who calls us to join him in his mission on earth. This paper will provide a platform upon which to raise further questions for our reflection. The writer, D.O. Fagunwa. I have long desired to read D.O. Fagunwa's novel, Forest of 1,000 Demons, a hunter's saga. It was Wole Soyinka whose writings constituted the primary resource for my doctoral research, and the one who translated Ogboju Ode Ninu Igbo Irunmale, which is the Yoruba for Forest of 1,000 Demons, from Yoruba into English, who drew my attention to this fascinating account by a pioneer in African creative writing. Published by the Church Missionary Society at the threshold of the Second World War in 1938, this pioneering West African novel also coincided with the publication of Jomo Kenyatta's Facing Mount Kenya, the traditional life of the Gikuyu people, my people. This latter book was the focus of my MTH dissertation. In that same year, an African delegation attended the 3rd International Missionary Conference in India at Tambaran, marking the beginning of an active African presence and participation in international Christian discourse on mission. It was also a watershed moment in Europe. A movement led by leading Bible scholars towards demythologization of the Christian gospel was gaining momentum. In 1938 was also the year when my father was born. He was a great storyteller who tickled our ears and throbbed our hearts with the sensational narrations of folklore and other captivating stories. Looking back at these events, and knowing that pioneer African theologians like Bolaji Doe and John Beatty and their contemporaries were yet to make their respective marks in biblical, theological, and mission studies, it must have been audacious a feat for Fagunwa to write a thrilling, inspiring, and deeply fascinating story of a theological revolution from an African point of view. To an As an early product of mission education in Nigeria, it was one thing to have read John Bunyan's Pilgrim Progress, or even Shakespeare and the Greek classics, that a Europe-oriented education would have bequeathed a British protected child. It was quite another thing to offer a radically African epic at a time when Africans and their religious sensibilities were being described as animist, primitive, and other condescending derogations. The movement towards the affirmation of primal societies and primal religions was still at its infancy. But it was not after the middle of the 20th century that the usage of the term primal would enter into currency in theological discourse. It would take even longer for this term to be accepted in theological schools and Bible colleges, let alone across the spectrum of academic disciplines where it continues to be ignored. Being a rich tapestry of myth, literary creativity, and biblical authenticity, all caught up in an undifferentiated transcendent reality, Forest of 1,000 Demons stands out as a pioneering work. With the benefit of hindsight, it can be argued that Fagunwa was prophetically showing what would be lost in Europe and the West in general, as well as what could be at stake in a secularized context, including Africa. But I'm jumping the gun here. The translator, Oga, now original fake, I swear. I must first express my gratitude to Soyinka for enabling access into Fagunwa's fascinating novel. I have long nursed a sense of regret having neglected to learn Yoruba language during my doctoral research that focused on Soyinka's writing and generally on Yoruba historical and religious heritage. In his translator's note, Soyinka remarks on the challenges involved in turning a creative work written in an indigenous language into English. Noting elsewhere how Fagunwa is a tough nut to crack, he comments that the pattern of choices begins quite early, right from the title, in fact. He then raises the question as to whether Irunmale is to be rendered literally 400 deities rather than in the sound and sense of 1,000 or 1,001, remarking on an earlier translation of an extract from Fagunwa's first novel, which was published in Black Ophios, a magazine which Soyinka edited during his early years as a member of faculty at University of Ibadan. He notes that the phrase "Momi Hobi Agility" aroused a debate among readers, some of whom contested the use of the toad. Was it a toad or a lizard? Soyinka offers a resolution away from this debate by saying that Fagunwa's concern is to convey the vivid sense of event, and that a translator must select equivalents for mere auxiliaries where these serve the essential purpose better than the precise. Regarding the sections in Fagunwa's novel that he, quote, mentally refers to as enthusiastic passages, end of quote, Soyinka's commentary is that, quote, the essence of Fagunwa is the fusion of sound and action, end of quote. He argues that the best approach in preserving the movement and fluidity of this association is to also be in keeping faith with the author's style and sensibility. Yet, to read translated works of a Christian creative writer by a translator who openly rejects the validity of Christian faith in African life and thought raises further concerns, chief among them the problem as to how to translate theological terms. In this translation, we are left to an extent at the mercy of the translator. It is really to the discerning Yoruba readers, particularly Yoruba Christian scholars, that we must look for the answer as to whether Soyinka's translation is truly representative of Fagunwa's faith and sensibility. If we take the, quote, enthusiastic passages, end of quote, for instance, we need to be able to assess the extent to which Soyinka has sanitized or reduced the Christian motif in the novel. In describing Fagunwa as being both an enthusiastic raconteur and pious moralist, and that his total conviction in multiple existences within our physical world is as much an inspiration to some of the most brilliant fiction in Yoruba writing, as it is a deeply felt urge to justify the ways of God to man. Can we trust Soyinka's expressed license in interpreting Fagunwa's creativity? By extension, and on the preference for Soyinka's version, 1,000 Daemons, over 400 deities, I wish to raise the question as to whether Soyinka has actually served a theological cause, enabling the space to redefine terms like deity, God, theism, or their related designations. Why does Soyinka insist that demon, and the spelling is key, D-A-E-M-O-N, daimon, if you like, rather than demon, D-E-M-O-N? Why does Soyinka insist that daemon is closer in essence to Imale than gods, deities, or demons? He tells us that these beings who inhabit Fagunwa's world, demanding at all costs and by every conceivable translator's trick to be preserved from the common and misleading association which substitutes such as demons, devils, or gods evoke in the reader's mind. At the same time, it is necessary that they transmit the reality of their existence with the same unquestioning impact and vitality which is conveyed by Fagunwa in the original. End of quote. In other words, does Soyinka's preference for the category daemon evoke a need for re-evaluation of theological terms that we have inherited from the West without passing them through the prism of African lingo-religious heritage? The difficulty that Soyinka is describing also has to do with the ability to communicate in English those unfathomable insights of the African world. He clarifies that he certainly never set out to be obscure, but concedes that as a critic, he tends towards what's called the elliptical style of writing. This style of writing, he explains, is quote, just a deliberate quirk about which I cannot do much, end of quote. His works are also influenced by his, quote, immediate external environment, end of quote, as well as by the Yoruba language itself, rather than driven by a desire, quote, to mystify or to create obscurities. I think I wouldn't keep highlighting the quotes because there are many, so I'll just read since you can see the text. Having grown up reading D.O. Fagunwa's works, novels, pamphlets, and others, and having translated Ogboju Ode Ninu Igbo Irunmale, The Forest of 1,000 Demons, a Yoruba classic, of course, by Fagunwa, the doyen also considered the doyen of the indigenous language novel, whose novels, says Soyinka, formed our fictional sensibilities. He believes that complex subjects sometimes elicit from the writer complex treatments. That Fagunwa's novel is a headcracker for indigenous Yoruba speakers demonstrates Soyinka's unusual competence with languages. He's, after all, drawing from a collective reservoir that has been filled by many layers of Yoruba traditions. As a primarily Yoruba writer who is so heavily influenced by Yoruba antecedents that he speaks Yoruba that nobody can understand, Igilengo Gesi, Soyinka goes to extraordinary length to affirm the African world, which he interchangeably describes as the true Black heritage discovery or uncompromising Black authenticity, or a Black metaphysical outlook and authentic African spirituality. Coming from a family that brought together the new and the old, the modern and the traditional, and growing up among music performances to the sound of poetry, creativity, and commerce, creativity and the various processes of living, it is not a surprise that Soyinka would find himself putting one or two words together in sequence, which you might not call normal conventional pattern, especially poetry. And he employs this in the translation of Fagunwa's work. Regarding the characters in the novel, Soyinka observes that Fagunwa's beings are not only the natural inhabitants of their creators' haunting grounds. Please note, it's not hunting, but haunting ground. In Yoruba, they sound right in relation to their individual natures, and the most frustrating quality of Fagunwa for a translator is the right sound of his language. He then, this is Soyinka, justifies his resorting to inventive naming ceremonies for some of his unfamiliar beings by arguing that the alternative solution, that the names remain their original, is to him not so satisfactory, as the names no longer possess the same non-exotic validity in a new lingual surrounding. Sorry, that statement is not complete. Sorry about that. Until we get a Christian translation of The Forest of 1,000 Demons, we are stuck, albeit thankfully, to Soyinka's brave attempt at delimiting Fagunwa to the readership of Yoruba speakers only. We must be grateful too for the glossary of Yoruba and unfamiliar words that Soyinka helpfully inserts in his notes. But would Fagunwa himself have invoked the proverb that Soyinka closes his remarks with, that the Christian's convert swore never again to dance to Shango drums. When he heard the church organ, his jacket soon burst at the seams. Has Soyinka given us a replica of the masterpiece that, after being subjected to the scrutiny of Yoruba Christian reading of the Forest of 1,000 Demons, could still be considered authentic product? Summary of the novel. I need to explain that this section is quite a bit long, but I wouldn't read it out all. It's divided into 4 sections, or chapters if you like. The author meets Akara Ogun, the first sojourn of Akara Ogun in the Forest of 1,000 Demons, second sojourn of Akara Ogun in the Forest of 1,000 Demons, and then the expedition to Mount Langbodo. The author meets Akara Ogun. I would like to just give you a taste of this book by reading to you how Fagunwa begins the story. My friends all, like the sonorous proverb, do we drum the agidigbo? It is the wise who dance to it, and the learned who understand its language. It is I who will drum it, and you, the wise heads, will interpret it. Our elders have a favorite proverb. As you do, are you not dying to ask me how it goes? They tell it thus: when our masquerade dances well, our heads swell and do a spin. Forgive my forwardness. It is the proverb which speaks. Now, I do not want you to dance to my drumming as a mosquito to the deep bembe drums, its legs twitching haphazardly at loggerheads with the drums. Dance, my friends, in harmony with joy and laughter, that your audience may wring your brows with coins and pave your path with clothing, that men may prostrate before you and women curtsy in sheer pleasure at your dancing. But for a start, if you want this dance to be a success, here are two things I must request of you. Firstly, whenever a character in my story speaks in his own person, you must put yourself in his place and speak as if you are that very person, that very man. And when the other replies, you must relate the story to yourselves as if you, sitting down, had been addressed and now respond to the first speaker. In addition, as men of discerning, and this is the second task you must perform, you will yourselves extract various wisdoms from the story as you follow in progress. Well, I do not want to say too much at the start, lest I become a loquacious fool, one who deserts clearly blessed path and beats about the bush. I will rather now take up my drum and set to it, and request you to adjust your agbada, toss its sleeves properly over your shoulders, your shoulder. Prepare yourselves for dancing, that the affair may dovetail neatly in the spirit of the saying, I can dance and you can drum. This is the meeting of two grabs. That, forgive me, is a proverb of our elders. It all began one beautiful morning. A clear daybreak it was. The Hamatan hares had retreated home. The creatures of the forest were still asleep. Those of the backyard were feeding on the day's providence, and birds were singing praises of their maker. A beatific breeze rustled the dark leaves of the forest. Deep, dark, and shimmering leaves. The sun rose from the east in God's own splendor, spread its light into the worlds, and the sons of men began their daily perambulations. As for me, I sat in my favorite chair, settled into it with voluptuous contentment, enjoying my very existence. Not long after I was seated, an old man came up to me and greeted me. I returned him curtsy for curtsy. Observing what appeared to be a desire to stay, I offered him a chair and turned it to face me. Once seated, we began to exchange pleasantries and share jokes like old acquaintances. But it was not very long after when I heard the man sigh deeply, as one whose mind was troubled by a heavy thought. Even as I began to consider asking him the cause, he began himself to speak thus. Take up your pen and paper and write down the story which I will now tell you. Do not delay it till another day, lest the benefit of it pass you over. I would not myself have come to you today, but I am concerned about the future, and there is this fear that I may die unexpectedly and my story die with me. But if I pass it to you now, and you take it all down diligently, even when the day comes when I must meet my Maker, the world will not forget me. When he has spoken thus, I hurried to fetch my writing things, brought them over to my table, settled myself in comfort, and let the stranger know that I was now prepared for his tale. And he began his words, and he began in the words that follow to tell me the story of his life. My name is Akara Ogun, compound of spells, one of the formidable hunters of a bygone age. My own father was a hunter. He was also a great one of medicines and spells. He had 1,000 powder gauntlets, 800 atto, and his amulets numbered 600. 216 QB lived in that house, and the birds of the divination were without number. It was the spirits who guarded the house when he was away. No one dared enter the house when my father was absent. It was unthinkable. But deep as he was in the art of the supernatural, he was no match for my mother, for she was a deep seasoned witch from the cauldrons of hell. And the story continues to unfold. I hope this just gives you a flavor of how Fagunwa, narrates the story of Akara-Ogun. Now, let me focus briefly, just for the sake of time, on the first sojourn of Akara-Ogun, this compound of spells in the forest of 1,000 demons. He's aged 26 years old. His experiences are greater than his father's, he tells us. He talks of the forest of Erunmale, a huge forest in Erunmale, a full 6 hours from our town. The road to it is the same as that leading to Mount Logbodo, and that same road leads to the dome of heaven. There is no breed of animals missing in this forest we speak of. It is the home of every vicious beast on earth, and the dwelling of every kind of feathered freak. A most evil forest is the forest of 1,000 demons. It is the very abode of Gomids. Now, I just point out that the notes I've put in red are my own comments seeking to understand what the novel is about. In fact, I've raised questions in the red sections and related to some of our own frame of reference in terms of our theological learning. So I'm asking the questions there, for instance, whether this is in Fagunwa's mind, his understanding of the world, what constitutes transcendence. Also comparing that with John Beatty's idea of African ontology, or Andrew Walsh's comment about the map of the world of the African people being a larger world, and the map of the world of Westerners having shrunk and become smaller. It is during this first sojourn into the forest of 1,000 demons that Akara-Ogun encounters the Lord of the Forest. He also encounters a walnut troll, whom he describes in very graphic terms. But the encounter that I wish to focus on is which I call the major encounter with Agbako, the 16-eyed Deviled. There's an illustration of him there, Agbako. Akara-Ogun narrates, when I set eyes on him, I was, unless I lie in this matter, smitten with terror. He wore a cap of iron, a coat of brass, and on his loins were leather shorts. His knees right down to his feet appeared to be palm leaves. From his navel to the bulge of his buttocks, metal network, and there was no creature on earth which had not found a home in this netting, which even embraced a live snake among its links, darting out its tongue as Agbako trod the earth. He had long and large. His head was long and large, the 16 eyes being arranged around the base of his head, and there was no living man who could stare into those eyes without trembling. They rolled endlessly round like the face of a clock. His head was matted with the hair, black as the heath and very long, often swishing his hips as he swung his legs. Agbako held 2 clubs in his hand, and 3 swords reposed in his sheath. A very evil spirit was Agbako. And then combat ensues, involving the use of magic, Ogede, and this is on Akara-Ogun's part, and the intervention of the forest are the following loud appeals from human. But Agbako is a fair fighter or wrestler. He allows his opponent to rest and even offer a sip or 2 of palm wine to refresh him before resuming their strife. But Agbako is too strong, Akara-Ogun. Overwhelmed and unbalanced, he says, I followed my buttocks to the ground, wallowing in the throes of death. Now, what happens next is instructive. he narrates, even while I groaned in pain, Agbako again took my missing arm, fitted it on the stump, spat on his hand, and when he had rubbed the spittle on the joint, my arm returned to normal, and I would not believe that anything had happened to it. Then he looked at me and, bursting into laughter, declared that we must continue the contest. My terror was not complete, and I said to myself, my terror was now complete, and I said to myself, Eya, is this not the certain approach to the end? So I cried aloud, Spirit of the woods, pilgrims of the road, hasten to my rescue. I talk about Pilgrim's principle. And shortly after, every being in the forests of Irunmale came, the gomits on the one side, the birds on the other, the animals separately. But Agbako gave no sign that he saw anyone. He pulled me from the ground and he grappled anew. If I swayed him, he swayed me. If I threw him, he threw me. The fight of the long and fierce. Every leaf was stilled and the forest lulled in silence. The gomits had been watching us for a while, he continues to say. When I saw one of them detach himself from the rest and come to the scene of struggle, he signed to Agbako to release me, and Agbako complied. Then he offered me a slice of kola nut, which I took and ate, and instantly a new validity flooded me, and my strength became the strength of 16 men. I bulled into Agbako and seized him by the neck. When I had squeezed it hard, he bellowed like a beast, and all the gomits cheered. Now, but when I tried to lift him from the ground and smash him in the fatal throw, his foot did not even turn aside. Firm he was as a lord in a crag. And he, in turn, strove to lift my leg to his shoulder, slap off the other foot, and paste my marrow on the ground. But he failed in this, and I stood robustified. He fisted me, and I felt it not. He kicked me, but he did not triumph. Then he turned, scorching hot from his head to his toes, and the breath of his nostrils was like a violent storm. And then he continued to narrate how Agbako could not overwhelm him, so he disappeared. And then other encounters follow. I wouldn't have time to read you. I'll put them down here just for you to appreciate the detail, the creativity, as well as the essences involved. All kind of describing what we would know as transcendence. Obviously, literary devices used to convey lessons on greed, respect, humility, love, concern for others, true service, prayer, among other themes. And then there's the second surgeon of Akara Ogun in the forest of 1,000 demons. In this second odyssey into the forest, now narrated to a larger gathering of neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, we learn that the intended audience is the Black races. And now this connects with Shoyinka's own concern. And this is why I have argued that even Shoyinka's own writings are influenced by Fagunwa. For instance, when Shoyinka talks about his primary constituency being the Black nation, whether in Africa or in diaspora, or that Ogun, the Yoruba god of iron, steel, war, hunters, orphans, and widows, is the Yoruba icon through whose devotion his own grandfather had initiated him into Yoruba religion. This is perhaps the best linking principle for Shoyinka's interest in Fagunwa's work. Another may be the aesthetic value espoused in the novel, an eternal value, which I have developed further. So I wouldn't dwell so much on that now. Explaining why, in spite of all the dangers lurking in the forest of 1,000 demons, he could not quit hunting. Akara Ogun narrates, I did hunt again, for it is the profession to which a man is trained that he must serve. The goods which he truly understands are what a trader sells, and it is not fitting that I should leave my profession at the prime of day and turn to masonry or wood carving. He who must do what no one else has done before him will experience that which no man has experienced before, he says. And then several encounters ensue. And in these encounters, which I won't be able to go into, we see the imagery of the book of Daniel. Similarities with the experiences of Jonah, being carried in the belly of fish. And I'm raising the question here through these encounters. The question, Akara Ogun, as we have learned so far, has been imbued with magical powers. He has means through which to fight or to disappear or to overcome his enemies. And I'm asking the question whether, from Fagunwa's point of view, if conversion is about turning to Christ, can the magical arts be converted in the name of God or Christ? Can people who are vast and skilled in magical arts, can those skills be useful for the cause of Christ or in the kingdom of God? Or is it possible to have more than one God in the sense of transcendence here? And I'm relating that to some of the scriptures that talk about there being only one God and beside him being no other. And also bring up the question or the point that Ido had addressed and also Bediako engaged with in his Theology and Identity, whether there are indeed lords many or diffuse monotheism in relation to Olodumare. It doesn't seem to be the case with Fagunwa. Needless to say, when Akara Ogun calls for help, he receives help. And he tells her that I was inspired by God to ask him a small question. And this is when he's facing danger, and wisdom helps him to escape from this danger. Let me just skip this section because it's a bit repetitive. And come to the third expedition. It's the penultimate expedition in the book. It's expedition to Mount Langbodo. This final adventure comes at the behest of the king. He is now prosperous, Akara Ogun, well-titled and highly regarded in the land. No, I wouldn't be able to focus on that now. But I've compared this expedition to Mount Langbodo to the quest in classics, for instance, Jason the Golden Fleece, Ulysses, also known as Odysseus, in Homer's Odyssey and Iliad. But also Shoinka has written two epics, The Interpreters and Season of Anomy, which kind of draw from this account of Fagunwa. I have explained this in details elsewhere. And also relating Ogun, the god of the Yoruba god of iron, metallurgy, and war, to Jesus. But this is what the king says to Akara Ogun as he requests him to undertake this mission to Mount Langbodo. Before my father died, he was fond of telling me about the king of a certain city, which is approached by the same route as leads to the forest of 1,000 demons. The name of the city is Mount Langbodo. He said that the king of this place had a singular object, which he presented to hunters who visited him there. He never mentioned the object by name, but he did say that if this thing came into the land of any king, the king's domain would win an abundance of peace and well-being, and if its fame would resound to every corner of the earth. Because you have journeyed into the forest of 1,000 demons on 2 occasions, it gives me great joy to summon you today and beg you from the depths of my heart not to fail to snatch a brief glimpse of this same king and bring me the thing in his possession. This was an expedition greater than any of his previous exploits. Akara-Ogun requests to be accompanied by 6 of the best hunters in the land. Now, the descriptions of the six hunters that accompany Akara-Ogun is quite interesting. It's worth quoting, and I'll do this quite quickly. Kako, his mother Agnom, his father Adivald. Unfortunately, when their child was born, his skin was almost human, and so were his various members. His parents, Gomitsboth, were having none of this, so they abandoned him in a hollow beneath an akko tree. A passing hunter discovered him, took him home, and reared him. He it was who gave him the name Kako, a foundling by the Akko. When we were children, we played together, and it was from this time I knew what manner of being he was. When he was 12, he killed a leopard with a machete and informed no one at home about his exploit. But when the creature had begun to rot, Kako returned to the spot and removed its thigh bone, turning it into a club. And from then he earned the name Kako, who wields a leopard's club. Then Imodoye, a maternal relation of Akara-Ogun, who when he was only 10, he was snatched away by the whirlwind, and he lived for 7 years with him. In all those 7 years, he lived on a single alligator pepper every day. He was well versed in charms, wise and very knowledgeable. He was also a highly titled hunter. Those qualities earned him the name Imodoye, that is, knowledge fuses with understanding. Now, the third one, of course, was Akara-Ogun. They're standing before the king. He's on his third, and we know something about him already. Olohunio, the voice of flavors. He was the most handsome of all men on earth, the finest singer and the best drummer. When he drummed, smoke rose in the air, and when he sang, flames danced out of his mouth. His favorite music was the music of incantations. Now, Olohunio is also a character in one of Shoinka's writings, in his play Death and the King's Horseman. So I'm also making the point here that he seems to have been inspired or influenced by Fagunwa, even in his own creativity. Now, the fifth hunter, Elegbede Ode, a human child, but had lived to maturity among wild animals. For when he was born, he had 3 eyes, one at the back of his head. This led his mother to cast him in the bush, and there it was he began to live among baboons and grew immensely strong. After a while, he returned to town and lived in the palace. But his nature was unruly, like the baboons, and this was what made men refer to him as Elegbede Ode, for Elegbede is the father of the baboon. He stayed a long while with the king. The king brought him a gun and he returned to hunting. He understood the language of birds and the language of beasts and was stronger than a lion. If you hit him, he felt it not. If you knocked him, he did not care at all. Nor did an iron have the slightest effect on him. The sixth, Efoye, a non-native of Akara-Ogun's town and a stranger. He was archer, and he really belonged to the family of birds, but instead of hairs, he had little feathers growing from his body. He plucked them out of all the time to avoid the jeers of people, but whenever he was fully clothed, no one could see them. He brought his wings into use only when deadly danger threatened him or his hands. Wherever Efoye sent his arrow, there it went unfailingly. Even if he did not see the quarry, it was not enough. It was enough that he ordered his bow to hunt it down. This he did without failing. But he was forbidden to shoot more than 7 arrows a day if he wished to avoid the wrath of Sokoti, the heavenly smith, whose present the bow whose present the bow to a 4 years father, whose present the bow was to a 4 years father. And then the last one, Aramada Okunrin, Aramada Okunrin, the miraculous man. It was a relation of a 4 year on the side of his father. He was a more singular man, for when he was under the sun or inside fire, he would feel cold. But when the weather turned cold, he sweated from heat. Everything about him was the wrong way around. So this third expedition turns out to be a great expedition, a most perilous journey indeed. So they will penetrate the forest of 1,000 demons in order to reach the city of Mount Longbottom. There are many dangers that lurk on the way, many that are described in graphic ways, but each of the hunters' expertise come to play, and they all act as saviors of the moment, if you like, in all this encounter. They finally arrive at Mount Longbottom, a magnificent seat and a large one. And he describes this city in beautiful ways. It's not quite heaven as you'd imagine, but it's on the border of the earth and the heaven. And it's where, perhaps, if I may just summarize what he tells us about the city, it's where there's perfection, there's order, there is symmetry, there is complete harmony in the city between the inhabitants of that city. Perhaps an ideal earth, if you like. On the last day of their visit, during the last week of their visit, they spent time with a man, a very wise man, Iragbeje, who teaches a lesson a day before they return home. Their journey back will be, their journey to Mount Longbottom will climax with a meeting with the king, who would then give them gifts for themselves, as well as gifts to take back to their king back home. Needless to say, only 3 hunters return home. Akaraogun, as you would imagine, Imodoye, the wise one, as well as Oluhunyo, the praise singer, or the one who was imbued with the gift of singing. So, as I have noted, in the city of Mount Longbottom, life is a united whole. There is no dichotomy between the spiritual and physical. The transcendent God, and this is my description of what Akaraogun narrates, the transcendent God superintended over the whole of creation, over the kingdom of the plants, the kingdom of the birds, the kingdom of the animals, and the kingdom of the humans. He also, in this narration, Fagunwa also resolves the complex matter of divinities versus Olodumare. The essence of being supreme can only be revealed and expressed in the one and only, the creator of all things. Now, let me come to conclude, because time is fast spent. Justification of the topic, rewilding the landscape of Christian discourse. I have derived my theme of rewilding from Isabella Tree's book, Wilding, The Return of Nature to a British Farm. Published recently, this book demonstrates the achievement of Tree's family in their effort towards handing their large farm back to nature with minimal human intervention and with herds of free-roaming animals stimulating new habitats. The result was such that their land heaved with habitat, and rare species are not breeding freely in rural ecology. Sorry, I think there's a mistake. And rare species that had not been breeding freely in rural ecology. It's also reported in the book that biodiversity rocketed. Indeed, letting nature take the divine seat can restore both the land and its wildlife in a dramatically short space of time, reversing the cataclysmic declines that affected most species elsewhere in Britain over the past 5 decades. That's a description of the book that I've quoted there. I'm very passionate about farming and agriculture in general, but this book also serves another purpose. It is a parable for our times. If you were to substitute land or soil with Christianity, figuratively speaking, and the concept of rewilding substituted with theology, theology understood also as an agenda towards the mythologization of the gospel, thereby responding to the demythologization idea set in motion by Western scholars in the middle of the 20th century. The following comments cited in the blurb of the book could also be directed at Dio Fagunwa's Forest of 1,000 Demons. A hugely important addition to the literature of what can be done to restore soil and soul. And I'm comparing that with some lessons on from Fagunwa's on morality, justice, and ultimate theology. Another quote, "This must be the most inspirational nature book of the year, a narrative of conservation, courage, vision, and miracles. Read this book and marvel." That too could be said of The Forest of 1,000 Demons. A timely and important book, Isabella Tree imagines the last migrating turtle dove departing NEP and flying over to a Europe that is being recolonized by beavers, wolves, wolverines, jackals, and bears. And it is in that changing landscape that hope resides. And I'm relating to Fagunwa by saying that landscape informs our knowledge, faith, and theology. It is not about reinventing the wheel. Who needs a wheel when one can fly or zoom at times? Yet the account of creation in Genesis reveals God as the first wilder. In his book, Wild at Heart, Discovering the Secret of a Man's Soul, John Eldredge describes God as the wild one whose image we bear. In this book, as well as in its sequel, Captivating, which is directed to, the first book, Wild at Heart, is for men, Captivating is for women, but both share the same themes. He also writes about discovering the purpose, the need for healing, the pursuit of the human heart, also identifies the enemy and the adventure involved in the pursuit of beauty, life, and thought. Theologically speaking, these themes and others not fully explored in the cited works constitute battlegrounds that require an urgent deployment of Christian agency, particularly when seen through the prism of justice and righteousness. It is not something to be sneered at when we see books and films replete with such motifs as quest for justice and freedom. Perhaps the disturbing aspect for us is that some of the publicized resources eschew a theological dimension in favor of a secular humanist orientation. Since nature abhors vacuum, could it be that these secular alternatives in the field of literature and the arts have proliferated as a consequence of voluntary silence on the Christian voice in the public space? Another theological concern that Akaragun's expeditions might represent for us is the life of contemplation. The hunter's odyssey could be interpreted as withdrawing from normal life, far from the maddening crowd, in order to experience a deeper encounter with the transcendent. In the Gospels, we see Jesus withdrawing into the wilderness in order to pray and meditate. It is also in the wilderness where he encountered the devil, a showdown that puts the devil in his place. The example of St. Anthony, that Egyptian desert hermit whose life could be seen as an embodiment of early African Christianity, springs to mind also. His withdrawal into the wilderness was for the purpose of studying the scriptures and prayer. It was also in order to confront the evil spirits and demons that dominated the desert. It is believed that through Antony's intercession, the church then and the empire as a whole was held together. He also, among other ministries, encourages followers to forsake worldly cares and be inclined to wit, prudence, justice, temperance, courage, understanding, love, kindness to the poor, faith in Christ, freedom from wrath, and hospitality. Our final reflection relates to the qualities of the 7 hunters. They were accomplished in all manner of knowledge and understanding. They were imbued with amazing skills and talents, which we might describe as spiritual and scientific. As they traversed the terrain of the kingdoms of the plants, birds, animals, and gomits, we notice that theirs is a mindset that holds reality as a united whole. This attitude of mind and heart does not always inform the approach of those engaged in the field of science. May I read you, well, I won't have time to read you, an extract from a scientific journal regarding a recent discovery of a tiny particle known as muon, suggesting that there are forms of matter and energy vital to the nature and evolution of the cosmos that are not yet known to science. This is a very recent publication. In fact, it's about a month old. I've got an article, if time permits, I can share with
Dr. Wagi, you need to be summarizing.
Yes, I am indeed. So another 2 minutes, Auntie Mary. A way forward. I was pleasantly surprised to learn of the agenda towards theological toolmaking that is being undertaken during a recent colloquium presentation at the Andrew Wall Center for the Study of African and Asian Christianity at Liverpool Hope University in Liverpool. In his lecture entitled Opening Up Intercultural Learning Space, the Potential Contribution of a Multilingual Theological Dictionary, Professor J.N.G. Kritzinger addressed the problems facing theological learning in South Africa. He then advanced a solution that would entail multi-bilingual learning in theology and the development of a multilingual theological dictionary. I attended this online event in the middle of writing this paper. It vividly occurred to me that a major resource for such a worthy cause was already available in the form of Fagunwa's Forest of 1,000 Demons. D.O. Fagunwa gives us a metaphor for religious discourse, a language of religion, as it were, a way of speaking to and about the transcendent, as well as a vision of a dimension of life that might be at risk, even in Africa, of being discarded. This would come at a high cost. So this is as much about repopulating the map of the world of Christians, as well as an agenda towards redefining of theological language and enrichment of religious experience. But what we now hope to describe, this is a typo. Does Fagunwa only occupy the space reserved and forgotten for pioneer African writers? Let me skip that because it's not necessary, and come to something I wanted to include in the. Sorry, my computer is now misbehaving. Anyway, let me end here by saying that I put forward, sorry, the article that I was attempting to open has taken over. Okay, let me end here.
Include in your own words.
Yeah, let me end here by saying that I have found reading The Forest of 1,000 Demons by D.O. Fagunwa a very useful resource for theological engagement. And I think up to now, Fagunwa has not been understood or appreciated as he deserves. And perhaps even as we look forward as African theologians, perhaps we're in good company, drawing our resources, our tools of engagement from such a work as this, even though fiction, but very much anchored in an African indigenous heritage. Let me end here. Perhaps you can say more during the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wagi. Sorry you had to be rushed at the end.
Yeah.
But we have some time for questions, but questions for clarification first. It's fascinating topic. It's not, it's out of our usual run-of-the-mill topics, and that makes it all the more interesting. So questions for clarification first, and then we'll move on to matters of substance. So please unmute your mic, and that will show us that you want to speak. Any questions for Abraham? I actually have one. What are gomids?
Okay.
Gnomes and de-wilds, what are they?
Okay. By the way, I should have apologized. I was recently vaccinated, and I'm experiencing some fever. So if my voice is not very clear or shaky, it's because of the vaccine that we were given. So, but gomids are described by, in fact, it was in the footnote, which I didn't have the opportunity to refer to. According to the translator's note, he says, gomids is a generic term for beings, neither human nor animals, nor strictly demigods, mostly dwellers in forests where they live within trees. They can be brought into human surrounding through incantations and charms. The gomid family include the bog troll, a soot black gomid with glistening skin, deviled, close in appearance to the gnome below, but far more dangerous and unruly. Of course, gnomes, a close relation of the deviled, and then others include beings like kobold. This is in the book. Types of gnome, spirits, ifa, which is divination, ogede, which is a spell or magic, and so on. So gnomids.
Do these belong to traditional Yoruba cosmology?
So they do indeed. In fact, the terms used are originally in Yoruba. So it is, the difficulty is in the translation into English.
Yes,
that's
right. But they are there. They're part of the cosmic world.
Indeed.
I mean, yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes. Jonas Martinson, I see you have your light
Yes. Just a quick clarification, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Doc, you made mention of the issue of demytholization, which was bred by the Enlightenment. And also in a passing, you suggested, I don't know if I got it right, but I think you were suggesting that the stories emerging from the forest of 1,000 demons can be converted to resolve that dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering how such a diversion can take place. And also, you made a passing comment about evolution of the cosmos. And I was trying to figure out whether you are trying to bring Darwin's evolutionary theory in the matter here.
Okay. I didn't quite get before the Darwin matter, the evolution of the cosmos point, the point previous to that. Could you just clarify that?
I realize that the issue of demytholization is taking away mystery from theological dialogue,
Right.
which was enforced by the Enlightenment period.
Yeah.
And in that case, it brings a dichotomy where the spiritual is separated from the physical.
Yeah.
But then I understood that you were making a comment that from the stories that we are hearing, there can be a conversion that can ratify that dichotomy.
Yeah.
So I was just clarifying if that is the case. And if that is the case, how does that conversion take place? Please, if.
Yeah, so rather than mystery, it's myth. It's a myth. It's a mythological effort towards.
Yeah,
so
I stand to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right to summarize the way you did about what happened, what took place in the West. That was only one out of many you know, points that can be said about how the West becomes secularized or turns away from Christianity, you know, generally speaking. Of course, those who are leading Bible scholars, leading theologians who advanced the idea, people like Rudolf Bultmann and others, the idea of demythologizing the Gospels. So the point I'm making is, of necessity, we have to mythologize the Gospels and use our indigenous religious perception of framework to interpret the Gospels, but also apply it to ourselves and to others, of course. So, and hence, you know, I'm proposing also that reading Fagunwa's novel is quite helpful in not only giving us the language with which to speak to or about God, but also the you know, the broadening of our dimension of reality, you know, because we too, we have to admit, because of the way we've been educated, because of the way we have been cut off from our own indigenous heritages. I spoke of my dad having been a very good storyteller, and he told us many, many stories, some of which I would really like to recount to our children. But those stories were not published. So my father died, and he died early. He was only 56 years old, but he seemed to have died with those stories. So we are hugely dispossessed, you know, in our own time. And with the dispossession is the loss of the imagination, the perception of the spiritual world, you know. I mean, there are still a few people who in many communities, especially African societies, who are still very much connected with, for example, with you know, the spirit world, with the world of plants. We're talking about herbalists. You're talking about traditional medicine people. We're also talking about witches, you know, witchcraft. But those are highly in the minority. And the question I raised earlier, which I didn't have time to expound on, was, could such people who are highly skilled, even in some things that we might consider to be evil or to do with witchcraft, are they useful still in the kingdom? Once they are converted, can their skills and their expertise and their connection to spiritual, can those elements be converted to serve Christ? So I think that's the point I was pointed to by the effort to mythologize the gospel.
Right, thank you very much. We can open the floor to other types of questions now as well. So please unmute your mics and ask your questions of Dr. Waige.
Hi, this is Ingrid Walls in Aberdeen,
Oh,
Scotland. Yeah, we had some trouble getting to log in earlier, so we got on late, and I'm really sorry about that, because I think that from what I heard, you are trying to cover and bring together many different disciplines in order to have a language to talk about the expanse of the world that we inhabit, in our human capacity, but also in our spirit capacity.
That's right.
And so what you're dealing with ultimately is the world of imagination, where the disciplines are not separated. And so we have an enhanced language to interpret and to articulate what's actually happening in our universe.
Yeah.
I think that I think for a lot of people this could be very scary, because I don't think that the people that have this spiritual knowledge, whether they are converted or not, the knowledge that they have, we need to be able to understand what's happening in our universe. And we were listening to another talk the other day that was covering the indigenous populations in the Brazilian rainforest.
Yeah.
And the amount of knowledge that they have, about the plants and about nature that could have an impact in our medical research, in all spheres of healing, that we are not tapping into, because they are indigenous. They have other ways of knowing. They have knowledge that has been classified as discredited knowledge. And so they are left to the margins. And that is a realm of understanding that we absolutely need going forward in the 21st century, especially as the realm of artificial intelligence is also expanding and growing. The realm of spiritual intelligence also needs to expand and to grow. And I think that it's the world of literature, the world of the imagination, gives us the tools to access. And then the world that we have of the Holy Spirit gives us the power and the courage to bring them together and to use them to better understand what it is that we are heading into as we head forward into the 21st century, where artificial intelligence is already very much a part of our experience. So yeah, I'm sorry I missed the beginning, but I am very, very, very excited about bringing together these multiple disciplines in order for us to have a new language, a new way of articulating what we're actually experiencing, and the role of the imagination and of the arts and of discredited knowledge to what it is we can do in theology and in whatever it is that we're seeking to do as Christian thinkers, Christian intellectuals going forward. So thank you very much. I'm so sorry I missed the earlier part of your talk, but I don't think we have anything to fear, because we are the people of the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
Who is the source of all truth. But there is knowledge that we absolutely need, that we are not accessing because we have so much fear, so much doubt, and a lack of appreciation for our indigenous ways of knowing. Right.
So Ingrid, if I have presented the letter of the matter, you have presented the spirit of the matter. You haven't missed a thing from that. You have summarized well what I was seeking to do with so many words, and with frailty of body shivering from a fever. So yeah, thank you. And that's the very reason why a lot of people avoid or don't even consider reading Forest of 1,000 Demons. They look at the title, they look at the illustration, and they run. And yet it's written by a Christian, a very biblically informed Christian who lived at a time when, Africans didn't have the audacity to do the things that he did, write the way he wrote, long before the Mbitis, long before the Idos, long before the Bediakos, and this is at par with other world literature like Pilgrim's Progress, like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, Shakespeare. It's accomplished work, yet we have ignored it because perhaps out of fear. So you're right. And you're also right to point to other areas of, for instance, South America. I know we have had this conversation to a certain extent, except the recent one you've mentioned. There's a book which we have in the library. In fact, it was procured through Auntie Mary's, agency. It's written by a Westerner, Jeremy Nabi. And this book, in fact, there are two. The first one is The Cosmic Serpent. And the second one is Intelligence in Nature. And it is based on his research and time among the Amazonian people, and especially learning from the shamans, the Amazonian shamans particularly, how they are able to relate to plants, how they are able to communicate with plants, reaching right down to the level of the DNA and finding cures and solutions to their own lives. It's a fascinating read if you can. Books that actually show that science and religion intersect, and they intersect meaningfully in human life. So thank you for that intervention.
Yeah, Auntie Mary.
Yeah, go ahead, Prof. Lai.
Yes, thank you very much, Abraham. When you said at the Andrew Walls colloquium that you're going to talk about this, I was quite excited.
Yes.
And as I listened to you, my mind immediately went to works which had been done by our own former chairman of council, Chancellor, Professor J. Nketia. Nketia has done so much, particularly with songs of hunters, Abofuju, songs that he collected, songs of hunters.
Yeah.
And now, I have a copy of Nketia's Abofuju.
Yeah.
If you read it, so I'm finding the resonances with maybe the Akan world, maybe the Akan world.
Yeah.
The mysteries of the forest.
Yeah.
And you see, then our mind goes back to Efwekume's Jesus of the Deep Forest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jesus of the Deep Forest.
Yeah.
And in Efwekume's book, the encounter between the hunter and the devil, Sasabunsan, is so clear.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
Now I'm reading, Christaller's dictionary, and it's striking that even the traditional word for the hunter, Abofu, is the same word that translates angel.
Yeah.
So you have angel, and then you have, the devil, Sazabonsang. So the hunter then becomes the messenger.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of theological language already.
Yeah.
Language that Akan Christianity has borrowed. And in fact, the same word, you find Inca. So already there's a lot there that shapes our thinking, but we have not really been exploring it. But there's quite a number of literature in our library, in Akan, which we are not reading. And it's fascinating that you are bringing a Yoruba, book. So there's need to go back and then to reread, these series of literature, these texts, this indigenous literature, because then it's going to help, in our reformulating of theological language. So thank you very much.
That's right. Philip Lai, I was doing my presentation in the company of Afwakuma. She's right here with me.
Oh, wonderful.
The things are so true. And we are actually without excuse when it comes to the concerns you've raised. And at the hands of people like Fagunwa, people like Nketia, these were very well-learned people. When we speak of mother tongue or indigenous heritage, people imagine we are just talking about local village things. Yet these people are highly learned. They read literature, they read classics, they were trained in a way that perhaps we are not trained today, and to our laws. And therefore, their engagement with the world, especially their own world, was so deep, yet also so the breadth of it was also very expansive in terms of incorporating other world ideas. So we are better off, and we are richer and stronger if we keep up with this literature and not just ignore it. So and the interesting thing about the theme of the forest too is Kumas, this is of the deep forest, forest of 1,000 demons. Yes, the deep forest lacks many dangers, but Christ has reigned supreme even.
And said into the demon. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure.
May I come in?
Yes, please do.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Bediako. Abraham, thank you for your presentation. Quite interesting, and interesting discussion as well. You've been talking about the need to re-mythologize our reading of the text of the scripture, which I find a fascinating concept, because you're getting into the issue of how do we interpret literature using a mythological framework. So I would like to read just a quote to you and get your comment on it.
Sure.
Okay, so this is the quote. Rationalists have their place, but their limited assumptions and methods must be kept out of the arts. Interpretation of poem, dream, or person requires intuition and divination, not science. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that quote in relation to the whole notion of re-mythologizing our reading of scriptural texts.
Yeah. Dr. Setos, thank you for that. I find that it's a very useful quote. I would like to have it maybe later. The rationalism and intuition. Intuition goes deeper. Goes, it's beyond the cerebral experience, and I think just to respond to that quotation, let me show you something that I had hoped to show earlier. And the point I seek to make is that even scientists are having to mythologize their science now. Now, this is a recent article that was published. I've highlighted almost all of it. And a tiny particle's wobble could append the known laws of physics. It's a recent discovery. Experiments with particles known as muons suggest that there are forms of matter and energy vital to the nature and evolution of the cosmos that are not yet known to science. This is, I think, one of the questions also that was raised earlier about evolution. This is a scientist speaking. That was not my own statement. And there's I have quoted here. Let me just read to you the part highlighted in red. We can say with fairly high confidence, there must be something contributing to this white space. What monsters might be lacking there? What monsters might be lacking there is the question they are raising. It's an unknown entity. It is, there's another point here, let me just raise. They're beginning to ask question of who rather than what, who ordered it, who ordered that. They're going beyond quantum mechanics, and they're speaking of cosmic ignorance. This part I have highlighted in red, this cosmic ignorance. So I think rationalists exhibit a cosmic ignorance that limit them to a fuller experience, even in a scientific sense that's available. So you're right in making that statement, and the statement is right itself. And I'm fascinated. Part of the presentation that I couldn't present at the end was the fact that if you were to consider the arts, and particularly in the world of filmmaking, now there is it's almost a concerted effort towards representing the world in a way that it goes beyond science, but also without subjecting itself to faith or beliefs or religious commitment, but to speak of relationships and realities in outer space, not in the space that we know, but also from outside of the physical dimension of life. And they seem to be getting away with it, but I look at it and think it's cheating. For instance, if you consider films like Black Panther, it's inspired by an African indigenous understanding of power. You know, I have argued that it's actually the Yoruba who perhaps present this very well. The concept of ashe. So you can speak, and that agency of the spoken word, the agency, the power behind the sanctioning authority, as it were, that causes things to happen. I wish I could. Anyway, I'll try and find it. Where the person who designed the costume for the Black Panther movie, Ruth Carter, a Christian lady, I met her. She came to speak at Calvin while I was there, and she spoke about how the power that is sought, you know, this power is a power to do good, but there are those who are seeking it to do harm, to do evil. And therefore the technology in Wakanda, which is the kingdom involved in this film, Black Panther, it has to guard against the exploitation of this power at all costs, even if it involves dying. And the king does die, as you know, he fights to the death. But you know, I won't give away the end of the story. So there's a sense in which we need to and the theology is a challenge for us theologians and people of faith to enter into the stage and show the bankruptcy of some of these ideas that have been perpetrated. You know, engage with them. I think Dio Fagunwa, you know, is a very good resource and an inspiration for us in this sense. I don't know if I'm addressing your concern very well.
Yes, I think so. You know, I think what you are getting at, and I think what we are all feeling our way towards, is a sense of the vital importance of the primal imagination, just to use that term, as a way of knowing and interpreting reality that does not discount the rational. It doesn't dismiss empiricism, but somehow goes beyond it.
That's right.
You know, as the quote said, you know, it's a matter of intuition and divination, not science. And I think, you know, in Christian terms, that becomes a bit scary for people. You talk about divination and the kinds of things you are addressing in your talk, people get nervous because they think, wow, you know, what if we dare venture there, what demons are lurking? You know, and yet going into the biblical texts, one sees a world that is alive with the primal imagination, where people operate very much in that framework, both in the Old and New Testament. And so, you know, it is not external to the Christian worldview to operate in that way. But I think you're quite right to point out the sort of limitations of you know, empirical analysis for our understandings of some of these things, the limitations inherent in the rational processes.
That's right.
That you know, by failing to engage the primal imagination,
That's right.
we limit our knowledge, both of God and of God's world.
Yeah.
And what God is doing in the world. And that has implications not only in the religious space, not only in terms of theology, but in terms of other endeavors as well. I mean, I think it is an important thing for us to recall that science had its origins in religion. You know, it began with magic. Science began with the arts, and science is all originated from that place of what we would call magic or juju, these kinds of things that have been sort of held at arm's length by Christians. So the need to sort of re-engage those sources of knowledge with a Christological lens, I think opens up new terrains of investigation and new areas of knowledge. So yeah, thank you very much. The quote, by the way, is from Camille Paglia.
Oh, yeah.
And her book, Sexual Personae.
Sexual Personae.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Sexual Personae. It's quite a lengthy text. I put the quote in the chat box if anybody wants it.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much. We
Hello,
should be
Mary.
those.
Hello, Mary.
I don't know if we want to have Abraham. Can you take away your screen, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I didn't
thank you.
Yeah.
We do have Raymond IIE's hand up. So perhaps let that be the last question, and then we will conclude.
I also
Raymond.
wanted to make a quick comment, if it's possible.
Sorry.
She didn't hear me.
Sorry, what did you say, Dr. Watson?
Saying that I also wanted to make a quick intervention, if it's possible.
I mean, but it has been, an unfamiliar area which we need to grapple with. So that one allows for a little bit more. But I agree with you. We need to be drawing to a close. We did have a late start as well. So Raymond, do you have a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Waige. From Colossians 1:20, where God is reconciling all things to Himself. How do you look at this scripture that in terms of converting of the deep spiritualities that are in the context from which you're talking about? Who are experiencing deep spirituality in their conversion, how do we bring this experience to Christian conversion? How do you reconcile Colossians 1:20?
It's interesting, Raymond. You refer to Colossians 1:20. In fact, I put it back to you that it is that passage itself that reconciles the question that you're raising. It is Christ Himself who reconciles that whole process of turning to Christ, to Himself, because Paul tells us that in Him all things hold together. He is the image of the invisible God, for whom and through whom all things were created, and in Him all things. You see, the problem is when we read all, we actually don't imagine all things, including these people and their experiences that you're talking about. In fact, I was going to raise the question as to what do you do with a witch who becomes a Christian, or with a malam or some diviner somewhere who comes and becomes a Christian? What do you do with all their skills and knowledge and understanding and insights into the spiritual world as a church or as a body of Christ? So the passage you have hinted at, I think, is therein lies your answer. In Christ, all things, including magic, including whatever experiences you would like to, to address to, all things hold together.
Thank you very much. Maybe on that scriptural note, we should conclude with thank Abraham very much for a very stimulating presentation, which opens up new horizons, maybe recalls us to an indigenous traditions that we need to get to grips with afresh. And there are pioneers, as Prof. Laye has drawn our attention to, along with Fagunwa, as Prof. Ketia. So I think it's been a very stimulating time. Perhaps, Abraham, you will make your paper available through the registry, because quite a few folk did come in late because they had difficulty getting on in good time. Sure. So that you make your paper available through registry for distribution, so that those who missed some of your presentation can go back and read the early portion.
Sure.
And I will ask Dr. Ingrid, please. Well, perhaps first of all, any notices from Prof. Laye or registrar, any announcements? And then we'll ask Dr. Ingrid to close in prayer after announcements.
Well, I have no.
All right. Registrar, anything for our general?
Well, there'll be some meetings, but then notices will be sent around to all those involved.
All right, thank you. All right, so Dr. Ingrid, please, do you close in prayer for us?
Okay, Auntie Mary. Almighty and everlasting God, you who uphold the world in the power of your word, you who are the source of all knowledge, all wisdom and understanding. We are grateful that you sent us your only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus, that through him we can enter into eternal life and into the source and the pursuit of all truth, the wholeness of being in our world, in this universe, and in the body of Christ, which is your church. Yes. We're thankful for the minds that you've given us, for the curiosities, for the adventurous spirit that you've given us to seek and to search, to explore, to discover, and to do all that we do in the breadth and in the depth of who you are as our Savior. We give you thanks, Lord, for our brother Abraham. We give you thanks for the combination of your wisdom, your searching, your ingenuity in and through his mind, the combination of the love for nature, agriculture, and the love for words, ideas, and the human imagination. Oh God, we are grateful for ACI. We're grateful for the collection and the communal ways of interacting and learning and knowing and growing together in the knowledge and in the wisdom and understanding of our Lord Jesus, the Christ. Thank you for forums like this, for our opportunities to come together online via Zoom. Even though we are scattered all over the world, yet we come together whole in your presence and in each other's presence, to learn, to hear, to listen, to grow, to embrace, to love one another in the love that you have put in our hearts, shed abroad for one another. So touch our brother today, touch him with your healing love and restore his temperature, restore the health in his body, recuperation from having taken this vaccine that we know can have adverse side effects. Thank you, God, for reigning in all spheres of our life and our pursuit of truth and knowledge and love, reflecting your kingdom, your greatness, your majesty, your humility, your power in all that we do, and in how we live with each other. Thank you, Lord, for blessing Auntie Mary, Professor Laye, and everyone who attended this forum. Continue to touch their minds and to lead them into greater things, because you're not done with any of us yet.
Yes.
For your glory, for your honor, and for your praise, we pray. In Jesus, the power in all the universe.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
A good day to everybody.
Amen.